Iraq, by the way, is an oil producer, so they have actually doubled their budget this year because of oil prices. You know, they had calculated their budget based on $57 a barrel oil. It's now $116. They've got twice as much money as they expected, which means they should be paying twice as much as they had budgeted for their own reconstruction, their own training. That would free up money that we could start spending here on infrastructure, on schools, on health care, and on taking care of our veterans. All right? Okay. Gentleman right here. Here.
The lobbyists' money and not letting that influence come into your campaign. When you are president, what can you do to continue to limit the influence in the Congress where there's that influence that's kept things happening, like more subsidies to the oil companies than to any alternative energy companies?
Well, one of the things that I think we have to do is to try to pass some additional ethics rules. I passed landmark ethics reform legislation last year that prohibited gifts and meals and lending corporate jets to members of Congress from lobbyists, and required that if lobbyists were raising money for members of Congress, they had to disclose who they were bundling the money from and who they were giving it to. And that, you know, there's nothing like a good healthy dose of sunshine as a disinfectant. When people know what's going on, then they can hold their members of Congress accountable. But I also think that, you know, long term, one of the things we're going to have to think about is how members of Congress finance their campaigns. And you know, we've been able to finance our campaign without public financing or contributions from PACs and lobbyists, but not every member of Congress can do that. Obviously, you know, we're much higher profile. We can get money over the internet. We need to figure out, even if it's just free television time, how to reduce the cost to members of Congress so that they feel as if they can talk directly to the American people without going out there and scrounging for dollars all the time. The truth is, there are some good members of Congress who would prefer not having to raise money all the time, but it's hard, and so they end up, you know, getting caught up in that Washington culture. The last point I want to make is it's very important for people to. We have to have a government that's open so that you know what's going on. And let me give you a specific example. When negotiations are done on health care reform, one of the things I've said, I've got a proposal that I know is of interest to a lot of farmers because you're, you know, entrepreneurs, and, you know, insuring yourselves and your family is very difficult. And I know that a lot of farmers, oftentimes the wife may work in town just for the health care benefits to cover the family. So what we've said is, you know, we're going to create a system where everybody can buy into a healthcare system similar to the one that I have as a member of Congress. Because my attitude is, you pay my salary, so why should I have better health care than you? And we'll subsidize people who can't afford it. There will be no exclusions for pre-existing conditions. We will emphasize prevention so that we've got a health care system and not a disease care system. But you know what? The truth is, Senator Clinton's got a good plan also. John McCain's plan really isn't that good. It wouldn't help a lot of people who don't have health insurance. But it doesn't matter whose plan is better or worse if we can't get any of them passed. And the only way to get them passed is what I've said. I'll have negotiations with members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, management, labor, hospitals, doctors, all those folks. But we're going to do it in public, in C-SPAN, so that everybody can watch and see what's going on. So if you've got a member of Congress who's carrying the water of the drug companies instead of looking out for his or her constituents, then you'll know, and you can hold them accountable. And that's why I think it's so important to put as much stuff out in public as possible. And this has been a very secretive government, George Bush's government, and that's part of the reason why you've had a lot of scandals, is because everything's done behind closed doors. That's where lobbyists and special interests thrive, is when nobody's paying attention. All right? Yes, sir.
Senator Obama, I have a recommendation.
Please.
I'd like to see our next president as soon as in his first few weeks, first thing that they do is to get on a plane and to fly around the world and to meet with the other world leaders and reestablish and mend those relationships that the last 8 years has really just tarnished and just destroyed. For our president, for you, President Obama, and I understand that there's a nice plane waiting when you become president.
That's a pretty good plane.
To fly around. I haven't been on it myself, but I understand it's pretty good.
That's pretty nice.
But to get out there and to do that, and at the same time as you're meeting with the other world leaders, to reestablish our relationship as a great nation, that take with you a delegation of some of the greatest medical minds in our country, some of the great doctors and surgeons to go with you, to meet with other doctors and nurses throughout the world, a lot of which we've probably trained here in the United States.
Right.
As you go out there, just have those medical minds meet with other physicians and doctors to bond together and put together a great universal health care system for this country.
Well, listen, I think it's a great recommendation. And just a quick story about Air Force One, though. I've only been on it once. This is a good story because we were dedicating the new Lincoln Library in Springfield, in my home state, and so I had a chance to go over and speak there. I was on the program, and then George Bush offered us a ride back. And you get on the plane, and it's big and it's pretty spiffy, and you got all kinds of people in there and doing all sorts of stuff. But the truth is, the best thing about flying on Air Force One is we were flying through a thunderstorm when we got to Washington. And we were bumping and shaking and knocking all around. And I knew we weren't going down. You feel very confident in there. Turbulence doesn't bother you at all. You're just like, wow, whatever else happens, this plane's staying up. So that's the best thing about Air Force One. They got, I think, about 8 engines on there, and but anyway, you're absolutely right that we've got to bring the world together, and we've done great damage, mainly because of our decision to go into Iraq. People don't remember how unified the world was behind us when we went into Afghanistan right after 9/11. I mean, everybody, even people who have traditionally been our enemies, they grieved and they mourned, and they said it's absolutely appropriate for us to strike out against those who would carry out those terrible deeds. And for us to have squandered that makes no sense. And we can recapture it, but we have to reach out. We have to talk not only to our friends but to our enemies, which I've said before. Diplomacy, the whole point of diplomacy is to talk to people that you don't agree with. You don't have to be a diplomat with somebody who agrees with you, but you've got to be diplomatic and reach out and lay out what you believe, be very firm, be clear about your agenda, but we've got to reach out to those who we don't agree with. And I think that part of that agenda has to be, what are those issues worldwide that all of us have to care about? Terrorism is one, and that's got to be a top priority. Nuclear proliferation, the fact that nuclear weapons could fall into the hands of in the hands of terrorists, that has to be a priority. And we've got to try to reduce our nuclear stockpiles around the world. Climate change. I know all of you spend a lot of time tracking the weather. Australia is going through a drought right now that they haven't seen in a long, long time, and I think there's some sense that it might, in part, have to do with climate change. Now, we never know any given year what is causing climate patterns to change, but there's no doubt that the temperature in the planet's getting warmer, and that's going to have some significant consequences for you and your livelihoods. And that's something we can't solve by ourselves. So we've got to put those issues, those agendas on the table. And we need a president who can help the world see its common challenges for the 21st century. That doesn't mean that we don't stay focused on hunting down bin Laden in Afghanistan. That doesn't mean that we don't maintain the strongest military on earth, which is why I actually want to increase our ground forces so that they're not stretched too thin and people aren't going on 2 or 3 or 4 rotations. But it does mean that we have to understand, to use our military wisely, we've got to lead with diplomacy. And then if that doesn't work, we always have military options available to us to keep ourselves safe. But that's always the costliest and most tragic option. And so we should preserve it for the end, not the beginning.